Tracy Ann, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. What are you seeking to achieve?
I think the first was awareness. I think for a very long time, people have felt that anti-Jewish hate didn't exist. I think Wiley's 48-hour rant on Twitter of non-stop tweets, and then his 4-day completion on Instagram of posting videos of Jewish hate has shown that anti-Jewish hatred is alive and kicking. And I think what we were seeking to achieve is that if platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter have guidelines, which they do, then they have to police all race hatred. And if they're just going to be a hate site, then they should be transparent about it. But they don't want to appear to be that way. So they have to take people like Wiley's invective and very painful race hate into account.
And I suppose that policing becomes more necessary proportionate to how many followers they have. I mean, I hate to reduce that sort of level of calculation, but in a sense, if this was just somebody with, a handful of followers, a couple of dozen, it would be less damaging. He's got 500,000.
Well, I mean, that's the point. It's like giving a racist a megaphone. Wiley is less the issue. Wiley hates Jewish people. He's made that very obvious. He's compared us to the Ku Klux Klan and say that we control the world and that we're the most evil people that exist and should be shot. That's painful to hear. But if Wiley wants to be a racist, that's fine. But what isn't fine is if sites like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook give him an amplifier, a megaphone, if you will, to spew that hatred out to 500,000 followers without holding him to account. I think my big point through all of this, and what so many people agree with, is that if Twitter, for example, wants to be just a race hate site and allow anything to go, then it must be transparent and say, this is what we are. You can post anything here. In which case, people like myself, the people that I know, wouldn't choose to be on it. But they don't want to be seen like that. They have guidelines put into place. And so they've got to treat race hate very seriously and remove it from 500,000 followers.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says, quote, social media companies must act much faster to remove such appalling hatred. Is it possible to offer up a sort of time frame, a workable time frame? I mean, clearly this can't be done in seconds, minutes, but you say 12 hours is clearly too long. What is a sort of workable time frame that would leave people satisfied?
I mean, this, like I said, this wasn't about, Wiley per se. This was a massively influential man on Twitter who went on a 48-hour hate binge. He just poured this invective out, and thousands of us reported it to Twitter, and they kept coming back saying, this isn't violating our regulations. If you call Jews worse than the KKK and say they deserve to die, I think that's violating your regulations, because Jack Dorsey, who has Twitter, put those regulations in place.
I think I'm right in saying that Instagram's talking about a seven-day ban. What would you look for?
Well, Instagram waited for 4 days before it did a ban. I think the point is both Instagram, all the social media platforms, if they're going to bother to put guidelines into place, which is going to attract people like myself, and I would assume you and others and young people onto it, they want to have guidelines which they have put in place. Race hate is illegal. You have guidelines in place to get rid of that race hate. If thousands of people have tweeted saying to say that this was offensive and broke the guidelines, then Twitter has to act almost instantaneously. Many of those posts are still up, and they radicalize people, and it's breaking the law, I think.
Which in a sense will be for legal authorities to determine. But in terms of the personal cost to this artist, to Wiley, his management have already dropped him. Some people will say, OK, there is concrete evidence that when somebody is openly anti-Semitic like this, there are consequences.
No, I don't think Wiley wasn't just openly anti-Semitic. He went, as I say, on a 4-day binge. I mean, he poured out tweet after tweet, video after video after video. Yes, there was a real life consequence to what happened to him, but I'm not talking about what happens to him in real life. He can be as racist as he wants. I'm talking about the platforms that effectively gave him the megaphone. They have to decide whether they're going to effectively not censor anything, in which case right-minded people will never use their sites, or if they have guidelines in place, they have to use them. Look, Instagram will take off pictures of women who are breastfeeding their babies because they deem them offensive, but they let Wiley keep up, and the posts are still there, videos claiming how hateful and awful Jewish people were.
If social media won't act, does it not behove the government to do so? I mean, I know you say, real consequences are neither here nor there on one level, but there are those who feel that the government ought to rescind his MBE. What do you say?
I think if this, I think if this country wants to give an award to somebody who is an extreme race hate provocateur, then that's up to their conscience. I mean, I'm not going to say, look, I just think, this isn't about Wiley to me. He's a racist, he's outed himself. He's proven a very good point, which is that anti-Semitism exists, and it exists very, very loudly on social media platforms. My main point of starting this whole campaign rolling, and thank you to the millions of people that have followed suit and the politicians, is that those platforms have to take responsibility not to give a megaphone if that's what their remit is.
Tracy Ann Overman, appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.